Hey everyone, so we're continuing with Genesis chapter 33. And I just love this passage because for several reasons. We see two brothers that were fighting for most of their lives who had separated because the older one had threatened to kill the younger one many years ago. And we see a resolution of their relationship and a forgiveness that happens. We also see the faithfulness of God. God had promised Isaac or Jacob that he was going to protect him, and we see that God is faithful to that. In the last chapter, we had the buildup, kind of the tension of this particular narrative where Esau's coming and Esau has 400 men with him. And of course, what's going to happen? And so we have the resolution of that. But I think we see here two brothers, two men that have been changed, two men that have made and found peace. And I think that's the big part of this story, all pointing us towards the love that God has and the forgiveness that God offers and extends to us. So we're not going to go through all of this passage. And again, if you haven't read it, I encourage you to pause the video and read through the chapter, Genesis chapter 3. So let me just read some of it. In verse 1 it says, "Now Jacob looked up and he saw Esau coming toward him with 400 men." Now note here though that in the previous chapter God had told him that his new name was going to be Israel. And it is kind of interesting that he's continued in the narrative to be referenced as Jacob. Now, at the end of the whole narrative of Jacob, God appears to him one last time, and God reminds him and tells him, "This is your new name." And it's interesting that in the narration, he's from that point referred to as Israel. So we'll get to that at a point. And so what I'm kind of wondering about that is that kind of giving us a little idea that God has said, "Hey, Jacob, this is who you are now. You're no longer the trickster. This is the new identity that I'm giving you." God has said that, but maybe Jacob hasn't fully accepted that, and that's kind of the idea we're seeing here. I think that happens to us. We put our faith in Jesus Christ, and he says, "You are my child. I am pleased in you. You are righteous before you because of Jesus." And yet we don't identify that way. We still identify with our old self, and maybe it takes us a while, even all the way to the end of our life, to really find our true identity in terms of what we think, not what God thinks. He's said who we are, but what we think. So I don't know, just some speculation there. But so 400 men come. He's just had this encounter with God. He's now limping. Here comes Esau. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two slave women. And he put the slaves and their children first, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. So he orders all of these people. He's shown some favoritism continually here. And then verse 3, it says, "He himself, he went ahead and bowed to the ground 7 times until he approached his brother." He is humbling himself. He is at his mercy. 400 men, Esau versus him, some women, some children, and his limp, right? He has no choice but to humble himself. But I love this. Verse 4, it says, "But Esau ran to meet him. He hugged him. He threw his arms around him and kissed him. Then they wept. When Esau looked up and he saw the women and children, he asked, 'Who are these with you?' And Jacob answered, 'The children God has graciously given your servant.' Then the slaves and their children approached him and bowed down. Leah and her children approached and bowed down. Then Joseph and Rachel approached and bowed down." So Esau said, "What do you mean by this whole procession I met?" And remember that not only is there a procession of the family, but there's already also been a procession that we learned from the last chapter of gifts. And then Jacob said, "To find favor with you, my lord." "I have enough, my brother," Esau replied. "Keep what you have." And then there's a continued interaction. I'm not going to get into all that detail here, but I just want to focus on the fact that we see a massive transformation in the man of Esau. We have a man that has gone from someone whose whole life was defined by the way his father viewed him as the hunter, the one that gathered to him the food that the father loved to eat. He's no longer a slave to that. He has found his true identity in who he is. He's no longer bitter and angry and jealous of his brother. But one of the things that I think is just really fascinating about this, and I saw this referenced in a couple of commentaries, and I really think this is accurate, is that verse 4 when he says, he ran to meet him, hugged him, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. That is a hyperlink to take us to the prodigal son story in Luke chapter 15. These the commentaries that I read, they theorized that, when Jesus was thinking about that story, he was thinking about this interaction that happened. Just look at what it says. I'm going to read from Luke chapter 15 in the prodigal son story. And Jesus said, a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate that I have coming to me. So he distributed the assets to them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered together all he had and traveled to a distant country where he squandered his estate in foolish living. After he had spent everything, a severe famine struck that country and he had nothing. Then he went to work for one of the citizens of that country who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He longed to eat his fill from the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. This is a man that's gone from incredible wealth, pockets filled, friends all around him, enjoying his life in every way that he wanted to the poorhouse. Somebody who's even starving next to the pigs that he's feeding. Not only that, but he has insulted his father by saying, I'd like my inheritance early, which is essentially saying, I wish that you were dead so that I could have what I really want from you, which is your wealth. Verse 17 says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food? And here I am dying of hunger. I'll get up, go to my father, and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired workers. So he got up, he went to his father, and check this, listen here. But while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him, was filled with compassion, and here's the link, I believe, to Esau and Jacob. It says that the father ran, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him. It's exactly the same idea. Running to him, hugging him, kissing him. It's identical. It's straight from I think that Jesus is quoting here and causing the reader from Luke 15, the listeners at that time, to be reminded of the grace and the forgiveness that Esau showed to his brother Jacob. Esau had every right to be angry. Esau had every right to seek revenge. Maybe I shouldn't say he had the right to it, but you can understand if he wanted to, of course. Jacob had been so deceptive and manipulative, stealing from his brother Esau. And yet, what is Esau's response? It is, I see my brother, I'm going to run to him. I'm going to grab him tight. I'm going to hug him. I'm going to kiss him. And look at what Jesus says in the prodigal son story, verse 21. The son said to him, and so here's the rehearsed speech that the son's going to give to the father. He says, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father told his servants. So the father interrupts the speech. You can see the speech got cut off. It was the apology, but it wasn't the, hey, maybe I could just be a servant. That part of the speech. The father interrupts and says to his servants, Quick, bring out the best robe. Put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. He's been living, he's lost everything. He's actually been living in a pigsty. What does he smell like? What does he look like? He gets a robe that covers up all the disgusting clothing and skin that he might have from all that life. He's barefoot, so he's got to put some sandals on him, and then he puts the ring on his finger to signify that you're my son. And then he says, bring the fattened calf, slaughter it, and let's celebrate with a feast. Because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Guys, that is the incredible love of God. And here we see a picture in the forgiveness that Esau and the love that Esau shows to his brother Jacob, who didn't deserve that at all. And I think another parallel here is in chapter 32 is the humble, repentant attitude in Jacob's prayer to God, saying, I don't deserve your mercy, which is a true statement. And we see that same kind of attitude in Luke 15 with the prodigal son saying, I have sinned against you. What I did was wrong. But what is the response from God? What is the response from Esau? It's like, brother, I got enough, man. I don't need any more of what you have. Keep it. I'm so excited to see you. You're my brother. I love you. And that's the same thing here with the father. You're my son. I love you. Of course, there's two sons, and we have the same interaction where the father goes out to greet the older son in the prodigal son story, who's angry because he's saying, Dad, why would you let my younger brother, your son, who did all these horrible things and who wasted all of his inheritance, your money, why would you just let him back in after all that he has done? And the father replies to him, Son, he said to him, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. In other words, son, I don't care about any of the money. I don't care even about what you guys do. What I care about is being with you. I want to be with you. What hurts God, what breaks his heart more than anything is when we're pushing him away and saying, God, I don't want to be with you. I just want to do what I want to do. God, I don't want to follow you. I just want to do what I want to do. And he says, but we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours, he was dead, but now he is alive again. He was lost, but now he is found. Guys, we see in this passage with Esau, I think, an example of the love of God. So number one, I hope that we can recognize the love and grace, the incredible, amazing grace that God shows for us. We don't deserve to be accepted like that, but he does accept us like that. We don't have to pay it back. We don't have to earn it back. That's an impossibility. He just wants us. He runs to us, he embraces us, and he kisses us. He is so excited to see us because he just wants to be with us. And then secondly, the final thing that I want to encourage you on is, have you made peace with God? Have you found this peace with him? Have you come to him through Jesus and his gospel and said, you are right, I have sinned, I have gone my own way, I have done these wrong things, like Jacob prays to God, I don't deserve this, I don't deserve your mercy. Like the prodigal son says, I have sinned against you and against heaven. You're right, what I've done is wrong. Will you forgive me? And God does forgive. He does forgive. He embraces us and he accepts us. No questions asked, without any condition. He wants us. He wants relationship with us. And I think that's the big part of the picture that's in Genesis chapter 33. So let's dig into it again further this week and come on Sunday ready to discuss and be reminded of the love that God has for us.